You prayed, you waited, you trusted when there was no visible evidence to trust. And still, what you asked for has not arrived. If this describes where you are now, what I will show you in the next few minutes may be the most important thing you will hear this year. Because the problem was never your faith. The problem was something that was sealed shut within you, without your permission. And within the next 48 hours this can change. Stay with me until the end. Because what you will understand about your waiting will completely transform how you see everything you've gone through. Let me ask you a direct question. Have you ever had that feeling that your blessing is right there, that you can almost touch it, almost see it, but somehow it still doesn't come? You see other people receiving exactly what you asked for. The promotion, the relationship, the healing, the financial breakthrough. And you think, I pray as much as that person, I trust as much as that person, why not me? That question is not weakness. That question is honesty. And God is not afraid of your honesty. But what I want to show you today goes far beyond a simple spiritual answer, because the answer to your waiting is not only in the heavens, it is literally within your brain. There is a neurological structure God built into you from the moment you were formed, a specific frequency documented by modern neuroscience that functions as a reception channel for everything prepared for your life. And modern life, with all its noise, all its pressure, all its accumulated trauma, has closed this channel, slowly, systematically, without you noticing. This has a name in science, and it has a name in sacred wisdom. And when you understand both, you will look back on all these years of waiting with completely different eyes. So let's start at the beginning. Let's start with the why. Why the wait has been so long. First, I need you to understand something that will free you from a guilt you have carried for far too long. Your waiting was not a sign that you failed. It was not a sign that God forgot you. It was not punishment for something you did or didn't do. The delay was not an absence of divine will. The delay was a matter of capacity. Your capacity to receive. Attention, you need to prepare now. I put together an exclusive resource for those who feel set apart for something greater, but live surrounded by noise, distractions, and mental overload. This is a 30-day journey that will transform your life. A guided path to armor your mind and prepare for what's coming with daily practices of focus, boundaries, and discipline. Stop negotiating with the noise. Learn to spot distractions before they control you, and strengthen your mind. Also available in an immersive audio version. Over 10 Zuru readers have already transformed their lives through the 30-day journey. Thousands of people have already started this transformation. People like you who are tired of living in the fog. Ordinary people who decided to stop accepting mental chaos. Take advantage of this limited time offer only this month. Access your link just below in the pinned comment. Now, before you think this is just another sophisticated way of telling you you weren't faithful enough, stop, breathe, and listen to me carefully. Capacity to receive is not the same as worthiness. You can be completely worthy of something and still not be structurally equipped to receive it. Let me give you an example that will make this very concrete. Imagine someone wants to give you $1 million. The intention is real, the money exists, the transfer is ready, but your banking system has a technical glitch. The account exists, the number is correct, but something in the system is preventing the deposit from being processed. The problem is not the lack of intention of the one who wants to give to you. The problem is a technical blockage in the reception channel. This is exactly what happened to you. And the part that will surprise you is that this blockage didn't happen once. It was built over years, layer by layer, by experiences your nervous system interpreted as threats. Every disappointment, every promise that wasn't fulfilled, every time you waited and didn't receive, every moment you opened up and were hurt, your brain, which was designed to protect you, was doing something that seemed smart at the time. It was closing the channel. This in neuroscience has a name. It's called desensitization of the dopaminergic reward system combined with hyperactivation of the amygdala. In simple language, your brain learned that waiting brings pain, so it began to block anticipation. It began to shut down the part that knows how to receive, and in sacred wisdom, this same phenomenon has been described in different ways over the centuries. In Proverbs, Solomon speaks of the heart made sick by deferred hope. In Hebrew, the word used for sick, there is not just sadness, it is a word that describes a structural weakening, a loss of functional capacity. The heart doesn't just become sad, it loses the ability to receive. You did not fail in faith. Your system was overloaded by the very process of waiting. And now I will show you how this happened in your specific life and why the next 2 days can be different from everything that came before. What happens in your brain when you wait too long? You are over 35. This means you have lived long enough to accumulate a significant number of cycles of hope and disappointment. And each of these cycles left a mark, not metaphorically, literally, neurologically. When you wait for something with intensity and don't receive it, your brain registers this as a threat event. The amygdala, which is the emotional processing center of your brain, stores this moment as a warning. Last time you hoped like this, it hurt. Don't do that again. And then, the next time you try to open up to receive a promise, to allow yourself to believe again, the amygdala triggers the alarm before hope can even fully form. It's like trying to light a fire with wet wood. The flame tries to catch, but something always extinguishes it before it can establish itself. This explains why, even when you want to believe, something inside you resists. Even when you pray, you feel the words don't reach the ceiling. Even when you declare the promise, a small voice in the background keeps saying, "But what if it's not this time?" That voice is not lack of faith. It is your nervous system trying to protect you from another disappointment. But here is the problem. This protective mechanism, which was created to preserve you, is preventing you from receiving exactly what was prepared for you. Because the reception of blessing, whether you call it divine grace, the law of attraction, spiritual alignment, or neurological activation of the reward system, requires the channel to be open. It requires the system to be in a receptive state, not a defensive state. And when you carry years of deferred hope without processing the grief of each cycle, the system locks into defensive mode permanently. You keep showing up, you keep praying, you keep declaring, but the channel is closed. And so the blessing arrives to a certain point and cannot enter. Does this make sense to you? If it does, I need you to let this reality settle for a moment, because understanding this changes everything. You were not wrong. You were not failing. You were blocked, and blocked can be unblocked. Kairos, the time that carries everything, chronos accumulated. In the ancient Greek world, which was absorbed into early Christian theology, there were two completely distinct words for time. The first was chronos. This is the time you know. The time of the clock, the calendar, the WhatsApp reminding you your deadline has expired. Chronos is linear, sequential, measurable. It is the time you used to count how many years you spent waiting. The second word was kairos. And kairos has no exact equivalent in English. Kairos is appointed time, the right moment, the instant that carries weight beyond its duration. In kairos, 1 second can contain what decades of chronos accumulated. In the Bible, whenever you read about the times and seasons that only the Father knows, the word used is not chronos, it is kairos. The turning point moments in sacred history are always kairos moments, and they have a fascinating characteristic. They do not arrive slowly, they arrive all at once. Think of the story of Joseph. You probably know it. Favored son, sold by his own brothers into slavery, taken to Egypt, wrongly accused, imprisoned, forgotten. 13 years of chronos, 13 years of nights without an answer, 13 years of questions the ceiling did not answer. And then, in one single day of Kairos, everything changed. In one single day, he went from a prison cell to the second most powerful position in the known world at that time. What Kronos accumulated for 13 years, Kairos delivered in 24 hours. You measured your waiting in Kronos. You counted the months, the years, the unanswered prayers, the promises that seemed not to come true. But God does not operate in Kronos. He operates in Kairos. And Kairos moments do not announce themselves ahead of time. They arrive. And when they arrive, they carry with them everything Kronos accumulated. The window of the next 48 hours is not a countdown to punishment. It is not pressure for you to do something different now or lose forever. It is an invitation to recognize that you are at an intersection. One of these appointed moments where what was stored finally becomes receivable. But to receive what a Kairos moment carries, you need to have the channel open. And that is exactly what needs to happen now. The scientific name of what was closed within you. I will introduce you to a concept neuroscience developed over the last 20 years, and that, when you hear it, you will immediately recognize in your own experience. It's called heart coherence. The Heart Math Institute in the United States spent decades studying the relationship between the heart and the brain. And what they discovered completely changed the understanding of how humans process emotions, make decisions, and here is the part that will surprise you, how they receive intuitions and what they called information from the field. The heart is not just a pump. It has its own nervous system with over 40,000 neurons. It processes information independently, and it emits an electromagnetic field that extends up to 1.5 meters around your body. When you are in a state of heart coherence, when your heart's rhythm is in a smooth, ordered pattern, this field is in receptive mode. The heart and brain enter synchrony. Cortisol drops. Oxytocin rises, and the nervous system shifts from defensive mode to open mode. In open mode, you process things differently. Intuitions arrive with more clarity. Synchronicities become visible. The doors that were always there begin to appear in your field of vision. This is what science calls heart coherence. And it is exactly what the Hebrew spiritual tradition calls lev shalom, a complete heart, an integral heart. The state in which Scripture says God moves powerfully. It's not coincidence, it's correspondence. When David said, "Create in me a clean heart," he was asking exactly for this. A heart returned to the state of coherence, openness, reception. A heart that stopped operating in protection mode and returned to operating in alignment mode. And here is what science discovered closes heart coherence. Chronic stress, unprocessed repeated disappointments, anticipatory thoughts of threat, and something that will surprise you, suppressed gratitude. When you go through so long waiting and not receiving that you stop being able to feel genuine gratitude for what you already have, the heart enters incoherence. The channel closes. This is not your fault. It is physiology, but it can be reversed. For years now, a specific practice has spread within spiritual and personal development communities across the United States and the world. It isn't new, it's ancient, but it's been validated in a new way. It's called a release ceremony. And I'm not talking about a religious ritual in the liturgical sense. I'm speaking of an intentional, neurologically informed, spiritually anchored process to reopen the channel of reception. The process has 3 movements, and I will guide you through each one right now. You can do this wherever you are. You don't need any material thing. You only need honesty and intention. The first movement is acknowledgement. Not the performative kind you do in front of people to seem spiritual. The honest acknowledgement, silent, intimate. You close your eyes and you name aloud or internally each cycle of hope that closed something within you, not to relive the pain, to give it an address. Because the nervous system can only release what has first been acknowledged. Maybe it's the marriage that didn't work out when you were certain it was the person. Maybe it's the business that failed after all you invested. Maybe it's the healing you prayed for someone you loved that didn't come. Maybe it's a promise you felt so strongly in your spirit you were sure it was from God, and it still hasn't been fulfilled. Name them, one by one, without judgment, without trying to solve them. Just name them. The second movement is grieving. Hebraic tradition holds a deep understanding about grief that modern Western culture has completely lost. In modern Western tradition, grief is something to be overcome as quickly as possible. In Hebraic tradition, grieving is a sacred process of processing that, when done completely, doesn't weaken you. It strengthens you. There's a verse in Psalms that says God keeps our tears in a bottle. That isn't decorative poetry. It's deep theology about the value of what is felt honestly. No tear is lost, no real pain is discarded. The second movement is simply feeling what you haven't allowed yourself to feel completely because you needed to keep being strong. For your spouse, for your children, for your family, for your community. You are allowed to feel the disappointment. You are allowed to feel the weariness of the weight. You are allowed to say, even if only to yourself, it hurt. This isn't weakness. This is the process of release. The channel only opens when what is blocking it is processed, not suppressed. The third movement is the declaration of opening. After you've acknowledged and processed, you declare, not to God, who already knows everything, but to your own nervous system, to your amygdala that has been in alert mode for too long, to your heart that closed as a protection mechanism. The declaration is simple. You can use your own words. The content is this: I acknowledge that I closed for protection. I acknowledge that the waiting taught me not to want too much, so I wouldn't hurt too much, and I choose now to reopen. Not because I have guarantees, but because what has been prepared for me is greater than the fear of being disappointed again. This activates what neuroscience calls the top-down regulation of the autonomic nervous system. In simple language, it tells your brain it is safe to be open again. And spiritually, it is the act of taking your closed hands and extending open palms. There's a scene in Joseph's story that rarely gets attention. It's the night before everything changed. Joseph was in prison. More than a decade earlier, he had been sold by his brothers. He had served faithfully, had been accused unjustly, had interpreted dreams for two of Pharaoh's officials with promises of being remembered, and had been forgotten. Again, on that specific night, the night before the day of Kairos, Joseph didn't know what would happen. He didn't wake up with a prophetic dream announcing the change. He didn't receive an angel with a message. He simply woke up. Another day of Chronos, another day of prison, another day of waiting without evidence, and then Pharaoh had a dream, and the cupbearer who had promised to remember Joseph and forgot suddenly remembered, and in a matter of hours, everything that had been accumulated over 13 years of Chronos manifested in a single day of Kairos. What I want you to see in this scene is this. Joseph didn't do anything extraordinary that night to provoke the change. He simply was available when the moment arrived. He hadn't closed. Despite everything, despite the 13 years, despite the betrayals and disappointments and being forgotten, when the call came, he was ready to answer. Available, open, receivable. But here is a detail in Joseph's story most people never notice. And it is exactly this detail that changes everything for you. During the 13 years in prison, Joseph didn't stand still waiting. He served, he managed, he used what he had where he was. When the jailer saw that everything prospered in Joseph's hands, he put Joseph in charge of the entire prison. Joseph wasn't waiting for a rescue. He was being faithful with what fit in his hands in the present moment. And that state of active faithfulness, of present engagement even within limitation, is what kept the channel open. Not the performance of joy he didn't feel, not pretending everything was fine, but the daily choice to continue being who he was, to continue exercising what was in him, even within a cell. For you, today, this has a concrete and practical meaning. If you're waiting for a financial turnaround, but have stopped managing well the little you have because you're discouraged, the channel is partially closed. If you're waiting for a relationship but have stopped cultivating the connections that already exist in your life because you're focused on what's missing, the channel is partially closed. If you're waiting for a healing but have neglected what was in your hand to do to honor your body, the channel is partially closed. Not because God is punishing you for negligence, but because the state of passive waiting, of suspending life until the blessing arrives, puts the system in pause mode. And a system in pause mode doesn't receive. A system in flow mode receives. Joseph in flow mode within the prison kept him receivable for the kairos. And you, today, in this situation that seems limited, in this wait that seems endless, you too can choose flow mode, not to force kairos to arrive faster, but to ensure that when it arrives, the channel is completely unobstructed. This changes your question. The question is no longer, when will the blessing arrive? The question becomes, what can I do today with what I have today, in the place where I am today, that keeps the channel open and keeps me in flow mode? This question, asked with honesty every day, is one of the most powerful practices of spiritual and neurological alignment that exists. Because it takes you out of the passive mode of waiting and puts you in the active mode of availability. There is a huge difference between waiting seated with arms crossed and waiting standing with hands open and feet moving. The final result may be the same. The arrival of kairos doesn't depend on your posture, but your capacity to receive when it arrives depends completely on whether you are in flow or in pause. And there's more. When you are in flow mode, in active faithfulness, with what is in your hand, you begin to see things that pause mode prevents you from seeing. Doors that were always there, but you weren't in the right state to notice. People who cross your path with exactly what you needed, but you would have ignored if you were absorbed in your own waiting. Joseph's story is full of these moments. The encounter with Pharaoh's cupbearer in prison wasn't accidental, but if Joseph had been so closed in his own pain that he hadn't noticed that man was distressed, the story would have ended differently. It was Joseph's presence, his active openness, that created the space for that conversation which changed everything. You have these encounters in your life too. You have moments where the next step for your kairos is embedded in a daily interaction. Attention, you need to prepare now. I put together an exclusive resource for those who feel set apart for something greater, but live surrounded by noise, distractions, and mental overload. This is a 30-day journey that will transform your life. A guided path to armor your mind and prepare for what's coming with daily practices of focus, boundaries, and discipline. Stop negotiating with the noise. Learn to spot distractions before they control you, and strengthen your mind. Also available in an immersive audio version. Over 10 Zuru readers have already transformed their lives through the 30-day journey. Thousands of people have already started this transformation. People like you who are tired of living in the fog. Ordinary people who decided to stop accepting mental chaos. Take advantage of this limited time offer only this month. Access your link just below in the pinned comment.